Okay, so we wanted to do our feasibility study on whether or not the Kansas City, Missouri area should bring in an NBA basketball team or not. There has been a lot of talk going on throughout the past 5 or 6 years about whether they should bring in an NBA team or not. So we decided we would research it and kind of find up with some things that we could talk about within this research study. We first decided that we weren't for sure if it was going to be a good idea or not, because of the Sprint Center and the schedule that it already promotes. The Sprint Center hosts many concerts. I know they host Big 12 basketball tournament. They've hosted a Miami Heat game. Therefore, with all of these schedules already in there, could you possibly fit in an 80-plus game schedule for an NBA team? Probably not. That was something we had to look into further on into our paper as we're going through the slides here. Another thing to look at is that the Kansas City, Missouri area already has 2 professional sports teams. With the Kansas City Royals winning the World Series this year, I mean, many fans have jumped on the bandwagon there, and the Kansas City Chiefs have always brought in a big attendance no matter how good they are. So that would be kind of hard to bring in fans for an NBA team, considering we already have 2 big sports teams that are already kind of covering the area. And the last thing we covered was if they could find an owner for an NBA team throughout the Kansas City area. So we'll go on to the next slide here.
Kansas City, Missouri is a popular area to go and watch a professional sporting event. From the MLB Royals to the NFL Chiefs, the options to attend a sports game are endless. The only thing that seems to be missing in Kansas City when it comes to professional sports is an NBA team. Back in the 1970s, however, the NBA team, the Kings, were the professional basketball team for Kansas City, but was also split with the city of Omaha, Nebraska. The Kings were removed in the early 1980s once their season and coaches started to fail. For a few years, there has been talk of a professional NBA team starting back up in Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas is known for its amazing success with Kansas University men's basketball team, the Jayhawks, and now even Wichita State University, the Shockers men's basketball team, who has had successful seasons and even an undefeated season. In fact, basketball is the most popular sport in the state of Kansas, but those facts are only based off college basketball, not professional. The success of the NFL Chiefs has been a very up and down when it comes to their seasons. But even through the bad seasons, like in 2015 so far, the fans stay loyal because the Chiefs have been around forever. It's a tradition to go to a Sunday football game in the mornings. Does success of a sports team bring more fans? Yes, it does. But an NBA team in Kansas City would have to be pretty good to get fans to come to their games because of the lack of history. Kansas City, Missouri has a population of 441,545 people, 48% being male and 51% being female. The Sprint Center seems to be a very successful arena because of its location and the events it holds. But is it successful if an NBA team were to have all their home games there? When the NBA team, the Kings, where the team played was at Kemper Arena, which is too old and not updated enough to hold any recent basketball games. Therefore, the Sprint Center would have to be the only option, being able to hold 41 regular season games with their already busy and packed scheduling. From a market analysis, there is no room for money financially to build a new arena. The Sprint Center would be the only option. Because of their busy scheduling and so many acts and performances already, it would be very difficult. Marketing a new team would be easy to do with basketball lovers in the state of Kansas, but the hype of an NBA team would only last so long. With the Royals winning the World Series and the success of Sporting KC, a new team would be hard to make money off of in the long run because they would have to retain mainly successful seasons.
Should there be an NBA team in Kansas City? At this point, it's almost starting to become a little bit of an age-old question. Leaves a lot of people scratching their heads as to why there has not been an NBA team in Kansas City for several years, because on a surface level and perhaps on paper, it seems like a good idea. It's really not. So, with this short little presentation, we hope to explain this clearly to you as to why there has not been an NBA team in Kansas City for several decades, why there probably won't be anytime soon, and why there also probably shouldn't be anytime soon. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here by starting off with what the advocates might say, what the supporters might say about the pros of bringing a team to Kansas City, why there should be and why it's simple. Their main selling point is going to be that Kansas City supports their sports teams, that they've shown plenty of support for the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals in years past, as well as the fact that Kansas City borders the state of Kansas, which invented the game of basketball. So you have that original support system there. You have the big college basketball following in this area. So why is it exactly that they can't bring a team in? And they're also going to want to go ahead and argue with you that we already have a state-of-the-art facility with the Sprint Center located in the social hub of downtown, neighboring the Power and Light District, Special Entertainment District right next to the Sprint Center. So with the facilities and the support, what is it exactly that's holding the NBA from bringing a team to Kansas City? So moving forward, I'd like to go into the introduction here as to touching briefly on the key points as to why there isn't one. The first question you want to ask is the city going to have enough money? Are they going to have enough support to uphold an NBA organization for several years to come? As the NBA looks at Kansas City and the owners, they're going to need to see longevity. They want to see that there's potential for long-term success to make sure that a move to Kansas City is actually worth it. Moving forward, counter one of the main points of the advocators that the Sprint Center is a great facility for an NBA team. While this may seem true, the Sprint Center itself does not actually have a lot to gain from bringing in the NBA team. When you have an NBA organization in your city, they have an 82-game schedule that is often unpredictable with playoffs, and it changes from year to year. Currently, the Sprint Center already hosts several major events and have no trouble filling up seats during the 365-day calendar, and we'll get into a little bit more details about their success with that in a little bit. But the Sprint Center hosts big-time events, whether it's huge concerts with big names, the Big 12 tournament, NHL preseason games, even NBA preseason games, as well as countless conventions. So when you're bringing in this NBA team with their unpredictable schedule and their long 82-game season, what you're doing is you're taking away a lot of potential. You're taking away these steady revenue events that are already happening in the Sprint Center, and you're just, like I said, filling up these dates. You're really taking away the opportunity for a lot of big names and big events to come in. And just trying to give you a little bit of a concrete example here. If Taylor Swift, a big name music artist, is coming through, this is just one example, on her tour in the Kansas City area, let's say it's a Thursday night, that is an event that would make quite a bit of money for Kansas City, would easily sell out. It is proven that it has multiple times in the past. You have, let's say now, an NBA team that's taking that time frame up. And that NBA game, let's say you have no idea, this kind of goes with the unpredictability of the schedule. They could be playing a last place team. It's just simply not likely that it's going to fill out the arena. And like I said, that just goes with the unpredictability of the NBA schedule and the kind of wild up and down curve that you have with the revenue versus with the other events that the Sprint Center is already hosting. You're going to have more of a steady revenue. Next big thing to counter the other point is that Kansas City always supports their teams, whether it's the Chiefs or the Royals. The problem is Kansas City is not a super big market. And the problem with that is you're competing with ticket sales with the Royals. You're competing with ticket sales with the Chiefs. You're competing for merchandise. You're competing for TV ratings. And the Royals gave a little bit of a sample size for these past couple years with their postseason success, having made the playoffs and the World Series the past 2 years. Normally, the falls are dominated by the Chiefs, whether it be TV ratings, but the Royals' success, they've really taken away from all that Chiefs success. The Royals are winning, they're bringing in more fans, they're drawing away from the Chiefs. And so when you throw an NBA team into the mix, it's kind of intimidating for an owner to want to come in and try to battle with these already two big organizations. And with success and the unpredictability of how this team's going to do, it's hard to tell what kind of fan support you're going to get. The next point that I'd like to bring up is a little bit of an interesting one, and that is who's going to purchase the team. Now, it seems like kind of a weird thing to say, but with the Royals and Chiefs, both owners, both management and owner groups reside outside the Kansas City area and outside the borders of Missouri, with the Royals owners down in Arkansas and the Chiefs owners even further down in Texas. So why is this such a big deal? There's more than just an owner into a team, right? Like, where are we to find one with the deep pockets? The problem is, like, a lot of people think that it's just tax dollars and other things support it, but we covered earlier that the Sprint Center, it's going to be a really tough sell for you to try to advocate getting a team in there for them. They are pretty set on the idea that they're making enough money with what they're doing as it is. So now you're looking at building an arena from the ground up. And you're going to want an owner who can help aid in that financially big time, because recently in the past decade, Kansas City has already done renovations to the Royals and Chiefs Stadium, as well as built up the Sprint Center. All things they did with their tax dollars. So you're going to have a lot of friction, a lot of resistance when it comes to selling taxpayers on voting to bring an NBA team into Kansas City, because it would require, most likely now, building a new arena. And so that's just kind of the key points we wanted to start with here. And moving forward, we're going to go ahead and try to cover market analysis.
Okay, so as you know, we're doing trying to put an NBA team in the Kansas City, Missouri area, and we've come up with some problems saying why we think it shouldn't be an option. Yes, down the line we think it's going to be great. As of right now, it's just not financially possible. Some of the options were building a brand new stadium or putting it in the Sprint Center. And the problem is, if we had to build a brand new stadium, where would the stadium be located? Would we want to put it in the heart of the Kansas City, or would it be on the outside skirt, or like on the Kansas side? And how would you get the funding for the new stadium? That's something that we figured out would be probably pretty hard, considering there's 3 other major sports teams with Sporting KC, Kansas City Royals, and Kansas City Chiefs, that probably some people wouldn't be willing to pitch in and or even get their taxes raised just for the new stadium. You could use the Sprint Center. It is big enough, and it has the right amount of seating. It actually has about 18.5 for seating options, which is pretty good size for an NBA stadium. But they don't want to become a one-venue facility. You would be losing out money on concerts, the NCAA basketball tournament, the Big 12 basketball tournament, and many other events are held there. You'd be taking away the revenue from those events, and also the Sprint Center is located in Power and Light, so it'd make a community impact by not having those events. You'd be taking away multiple business spots and bringing in the people into the dining and the bars and the shopping centers there. You'd be taking away from that opportunity if we would bring in an NBA team, because you'd go from multiple venues to one venue and not driving in a whole lot of money. You would get some revenue off the NBA team being there. That would be via ticket sales, merchandise sales, sponsorships. You would be able to bring people into the Power and Light District, which would be awesome, but would you actually be gaining money? Like, are people going to be spending is it more money on one venue or having multiple venues in this one building, and more people are going to be coming into the Kansas City area more often if they have more events, which is another problem why they don't want to become a one venue place. Also, one second here. With the ticket sales aspect, not every time the NBA team is going to sell out the stadium, unlike the concerts, because more people are going to be willing to come to those multiple concerts. That's going to be kind of hard. Merchandise revenues, it's going to be hard to sell some stuff out there via shirts, jackets, whatever it is, merchandise-wise, because there are 3 other professional sports teams in the Kansas City area. The growth rate of the income and expenses is going to vary with how successful and not successful the team is. So all your ticket sales, merchandise sales, sponsorships, concession stands, and all those other little stuff is going to be riding on whether or not this team is successful in the Kansas City area. You bring in a poor team, not a lot of people are going to spend the money for the team. A lot of people aren't going to show up, so that's going to hurt you. But you bring in a pretty good, successful team, and they do really well. Obviously, people are going to be wanting to spend the money for those products and concessions and so. I think it would be amazing if we could put an NBA team in the Kansas City area, just in the fact that there are other professional teams. But as of right now, the expenses, facilities, merchandise, tickets, concessions, all that is just going to be too much for the Kansas City area, and that's why there shouldn't be a team in the Kansas City area right now.
When looking at the potential economic impact for a city and the surrounding areas from bringing any professional sport franchise to a city, you have to look at many factors to determine the true impact that it will actually have. Now, some of those factors include the cost of franchise operations, the cost of arena or stadium operations, the cost of any renovations or upgrades to the arena or stadium, how many attendees are day trippers versus overnighters, how much money would have been spent in the city anyways, and many more. Many people just look at the overall amount that a team brings to the city and automatically assume that that is the amount of money that the city is getting. Unfortunately, this couldn't be farther from the truth. There have been multiple studies conducted on the economic impact on a city from a professional sport franchise. Most of these studies have found that there is very little positive impact on the city. And according to research published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, having a pro sports team in town may be a net negative for the local economy. Paul Stodahar, Professor Emeritus of Business Administration at California State University, found in an examination of last year's National Basketball Association lockout that shutting down sports leagues can be good for a city's finances. Even if the 2011-2012 season had been canceled, it likely would have had little, if any, effect on the economic health of the cities that host NBA teams. A 2001 study of past work stoppages found that in 37 metropolitan area economies with professional sports franchises, there was no overall financial impact. Indeed, the sports appeared to perform better financially in years that games were canceled. Now, there were other options that people spent their entertainment dollars on, in a substitution effect, while security needed for public safety at sporting events cost less because games were not played. Now, while there may be little, if any, positive impact on a city as a whole from simply having a professional basketball team, that does not mean that local businesses won't see a slight positive impact because of the people that do travel to see the games. Those that do travel will stay in local hotels and eat at local restaurants. It is very conceivable that after a game played at the Sprint Center, several of the attendees would go to the Power and Lights District to celebrate after a win or to help take their minds off of a loss. While people will still go to the entertainment areas of Kansas City, whether they have a team or not, having the team.
There are endless advantages and disadvantages to bringing an NBA team homebound. In some cases, like this one, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. The most impactful drawback would be the need to increase city taxes to update the Sprint Center and to form an NBA team. It'd be hard for taxpayers to want to pay for a team that they don't know if it'll be successful or unsuccessful. It'd also be hard for them to pay if they're not a fan of the team. In Kansas City, they already have the Kansas City Chiefs, the Kansas City Royals, and Sporting KC. And for the NBA teams, they already have the Oklahoma City Thunder and Chicago Bulls fans up there. It would take an extremely long time to raise the funds to bring an NBA team to Kansas City. Also, the Sprint Center is not currently equipped to handle a basketball team and all of their necessary equipment. They would have to use people's tax money to update the Sprint Center. There would be many changes to the Sprint Center, like updating the flooring to make it usable by an NBA team. They would also have to buy the basketball hoops and official scoreboards, shot clocks. That's not even half of it. These are just changes that would be needed to make the Sprint Center usable for an NBA team. The owner would also have to help contribute to bringing the team in. Owners would have to purchase basketballs, official uniforms, scorebooks, players' equipment, and protective gear and accessories for the players. This is just a fraction of the amount of equipment that the team would need to just even be considered a functioning pro basketball team. The Sprint Center could lose a lot of money because they would have to be able to host the home games of their team. If Kansas City had a home basketball team, they would have to have all of those home dates in the books and delete all of the money-making concerts and games and activities that are all coming to the Kansas City area. That could make the Sprint Center lose a ton of money, especially if they don't know if the new NBA team will be bringing in the money that they would be losing. The most important expense and the largest expense would be the players. Going to a new team with no background could be extremely hard for a player to want to sign on with that team, whether he's known or unknown. It'd be easier for a new college student coming out and wanting to get into the games than getting a star athlete into the games. Players would be putting their reputation on the line with the chance of the team. Like, if the team ends up being a really great team, it could help their careers in a great way. But if their teams end up being extremely awful, it could impact their career in a very terrible way also. The owners would have to pay a really pretty penny to get players to even consider joining their team if they're already a part of another team that's doing well and they know that they're going to keep doing well and that team is established. The cost would also depend on the player. So whether the player is coming straight out of college, they obviously will take probably less money than if you were to call up LeBron James and ask him to play for the Kansas City basketball team. Also, every team needs a coach, and that can be just as expensive or even more expensive as a player. It would be hard to find a good coach that everyone knows and they know that they can make their team go a far way with the team being unknown and not having any background and not knowing who the players would be or if the players would even be successful together. In order for the team and the Sprint Center to make any money, they would have to get their team known very well with their marketing strategies, whether that's selling the cheapest t-shirts they could even think of or putting a billboard on the busiest highway possible. The Sprint Center and Kansas City would lose money for a while at least with the new basketball team. With paying for the equipment, the team, updating the Sprint Center, and all the marketing that they would have to go through. I just don't see getting a basketball team as a smart financial move for Kansas City.
So, in conclusion, after going through all the parts of the feasibility paper that we researched, we thought that the Kansas City, Missouri area should not have an NBA team for multiple reasons. One being demographically, the Kansas City area already had two pro sports teams, which I mentioned in the introduction, the Kansas City Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those two teams typically bring in a big attendance for the Kansas City area, and it would take multiple years for the NBA team to be successful for those fans to switch over. Another thing is that the team could demographically find enough support through the city. The Sprint Center already has 750 events per year in their facility. Therefore, promoting an NBA schedule into their venue probably would not be not only affordable, but there would be nowhere to even host those games in the first place. We do not think there is an owner or a group of owners as well out there who could even afford to have the pockets to start up an NBA team throughout the Kansas City area. Therefore, at this time, we do not think that the Kansas City area on the Missouri side should try and start up an NBA team within the next few years.